Hi everyone, welcome to the channel After All That Years.
I'd been married to Susan for 8 years, and I thought I knew her better than anyone. That Tuesday night in March changed everything I believed about my life, my marriage, and the woman I'd shared a bed with for nearly a decade. The drive home from my evening shift felt longer than usual. I work at a manufacturing plant about 20 minutes outside town, and the late shifts always leave me drained. All I wanted was to grab a cold beer from the fridge, maybe catch the tail end of some late-night show, and fall asleep next to my wife. Simple pleasures for a simple man, or so I thought. Our neighborhood is one of those quiet suburban streets where nothing exciting ever happens. Kids ride their bikes during the day, neighbors wave from their porches, and by 10 o'clock most houses are dark. That's why the soft glow coming from our garage window caught my attention immediately. I sat in my truck for a moment, staring at that faint yellow light, trying to remember if I'd left something on. The garage has always been my domain. Susan rarely sets foot in there, claiming it smells like motor oil and old tools. She's not wrong. I keep my father's old workbench in there, along with a motorcycle I've been tinkering with for 3 years and will probably never finish. It's my retreat, the one place in the house where I can think clearly. But tonight, there were voices drifting from inside. I climbed out of the truck slowly, my work boots crunching on the gravel driveway. The house itself was completely dark, which meant Susan should have been asleep hours ago. She'd kissed me goodbye around 5 that afternoon, mentioning something about turning in early because she had a headache. Yet, here she was, apparently having some kind of conversation in my garage at nearly midnight. As I got closer, the voices became clearer. 2 people talking in hushed tones. One was definitely Susan. I'd recognize her laugh anywhere, though it sounded different somehow. Lighter. More carefree than I'd heard in months. The other voice belonged to a man I didn't recognize. My heart started beating faster, though I wasn't sure why. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was something deeper. I approached the side door of the garage, the one that leads directly from the driveway. My hand trembled slightly as I reached for the knob. The door wasn't locked. It never is. I turned it as quietly as possible and opened it just a crack, enough to see inside without being noticed. What I saw will be burned into my memory for the rest of my life. Susan was sitting on my workbench, her legs dangling like a teenager's. Her hair was messed up in that particular way that happens when someone's been running their fingers through it. She was laughing at something a man was saying, a guy I'd never seen before. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with broad shoulders and the kind of rough, weathered look that comes from working with your hands. His hand was resting casually on Susan's thigh, like it belonged there. They were completely absorbed in each other, speaking in the kind of intimate whispers that married couples use in bed. I stood there frozen, my brain refusing to process what my eyes were seeing. This had to be some kind of mistake, some innocent explanation I couldn't grasp yet. Then Susan glanced toward the door. The change in her expression was instantaneous. The smile vanished, replaced by pure terror. Her face went white, and she nearly slipped off the workbench. "Gary," she gasped, my name barely audible. The man turned around, and instead of looking embarrassed or guilty, he seemed almost annoyed by the interruption. He straightened up to his full height and crossed his arms, staring at me like I was the one who didn't belong here. "What's going on?" I managed to ask, though my voice sounded strange to my own ears. Susan hopped down from the workbench, frantically trying to smooth her hair and straighten her clothes. "Gary, honey, it's not. This isn't what it looks like. Please let me explain." But it was exactly what it looked like. Even in my shocked state, I could see that clearly. "Who is this?" I asked, nodding toward the stranger. Susan's mouth opened and closed a few times before she found her voice. This is Jake. He's just a friend from work. We were just talking." "A friend?" I repeated slowly. "And friends from work usually put their hands on your leg while you sit on my workbench?" Jake let out a short laugh. "Look, man, I think you're jumping to conclusions here. We were just having a conversation. Nothing happened." Something about his casual arrogance made my blood boil. "Nothing happened? Is that what you call this?" I gestured around the garage, taking in Susan's disheveled appearance, the intimate way they'd been positioned, the guilty look on my wife's face. "Gary, please." Susan stepped toward me, her voice shaking. "Can we just go inside and talk about this like adults? You're misunderstanding the situation." "No." The word came out harder than I intended. "We're going to talk about it right here, right now. I want to know what the hell is going on in my own garage." Jake shook his head and started walking toward the door. I don't need this drama. I'm out of here. Don't you dare walk away, I called after him. You owe me an explanation too. He paused at the doorway and turned back with that same infuriating smirk. I don't owe you anything, buddy. You should probably ask your wife why she keeps texting me at all hours of the night. With that, he was gone, leaving the garage door swinging open behind him. The silence that followed felt suffocating. I turned back to Susan, who was now crying quietly, her shoulders shaking. How long has this been going on? I asked. It's not what you think, she said again, but her voice cracked on the words. Then tell me what it is, Susan. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like my wife has been sneaking around with some guy in our garage. So please, enlighten me. She finally looked up at me, and I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen in years. Fear. Not the fear of physical danger, but the fear that comes when you know the truth is about to destroy everything. It's complicated, she began. Complicated? I felt my temper flare. You think you can stand there and call this complicated? No, Susan. It's actually pretty simple. Either you've been cheating on me, or you haven't. Which is it? Her silence told me everything I needed to know. I felt like the ground had opened up beneath my feet. 8 years of marriage, countless shared memories, plans we'd made for the future. It all felt like a lie now. I wanted to shout, to demand answers, to make her explain how we'd gotten to this point. But all I could do was stand there, staring at the woman I thought I knew, wondering when everything had started to fall apart. I'm going inside, I finally said. When I get back, I want the truth. All of it. No more lies. I turned and walked out of the garage, leaving Susan behind. My legs felt unsteady as I made my way to the house, my mind spinning with questions and possibilities I didn't want to consider. In the kitchen, I noticed my phone on the counter. There was a new message notification. It was from Walter, our next-door neighbor. Gary, there's something you need to see. Check your email. Walter isn't the type to get involved in other people's business. He's a retired electrician who keeps to himself and tends his garden. For him to reach out like this meant something serious was happening. I opened my laptop with shaking hands and logged into my email. There it was, a message from Walter with the subject line, "You deserve to know." The email was brief. Gary, I didn't want to interfere, but I've seen enough to know you need the truth. I'm attaching some footage from my security camera. You'll understand when you watch it. I clicked on the video file, my stomach churning as it loaded. The footage was grainy, shot from an angle that showed part of our driveway and garage. The timestamp showed it was from 2 nights ago, one of the evenings I'd worked late to finish a rush order. The video started with Susan standing in our driveway, looking nervously up and down the street. A few minutes later, a pickup truck pulled up. Jake got out, and Susan greeted him with a hug that lasted far too long to be innocent. They talked for a moment, both of them laughing, before disappearing into the garage together. Walter's camera couldn't see inside the garage, but the door stayed closed for over an hour. When they finally emerged, Susan's hair was messy and her face was flushed. She gave Jake a kiss on the cheek before he drove away. I paused the video, my hands clenched into fists. This wasn't just tonight. This had been going on for who knows how long, right under my nose, while I was working overtime to pay our bills and keep our life on track. I heard the front door open and close. Susan's footsteps approached the kitchen. Gary? She called softly. I didn't answer. I couldn't trust myself to speak without exploding. She appeared in the doorway, her face pale and her eyes red from crying. Gary, please, we need to talk. I turned the laptop screen toward her, showing the paused video of her embracing Jake in our driveway. Her face went white. Walter sent me this, I said, my voice deadly calm. He's been watching, apparently more than I have. So I'll ask you again. How long has this been going on? She stumbled backward, gripping the doorframe for support. A few months, she whispered. A few months. The words tasted bitter in my mouth. While I've been working overtime trying to save money for that trip you wanted to take, you've been sneaking around with him. Tears streamed down her face. It wasn't supposed to happen. It wasn't serious. It didn't mean anything. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. It didn't mean anything? Do you think that makes it better? You've been lying to me, betraying everything we built together, and now you want me to believe it was meaningless? She stepped closer, reaching out toward me, but I backed away. Gary, please. I'm sorry. I made a terrible mistake. I was lonely, and you've been so busy with work lately. Don't. My voice was sharp enough to cut glass. Don't you dare try to blame this on me. I've been working extra hours for us, Susan, for our future. And this is how you repay me? She collapsed into a chair, sobbing uncontrollably. But I felt nothing. My heart was broken, and all her tears couldn't put it back together. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. You're going to pack a bag and leave tonight. I don't care where you go, Jake's place, a hotel, your sister's house, but you're not staying here. Gary, no, she begged. Please don't do this. We can work through this. We can go to counseling, talk to someone. Please don't give up on us. There is no us anymore, I said quietly. Not after this. I walked out of the kitchen, leaving her crying at the table. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but I knew one thing for certain. The life I thought I had was over, and there was no going back. I sat in my recliner in the living room, staring at the blank television screen. The events of the evening played over and over in my mind like a movie I couldn't turn off. Susan's sobs echoed from the kitchen, but I couldn't bring myself to feel anything except a deep, hollow numbness. 8 years. 8 years of marriage, of building a life together, of thinking I knew the person sleeping next to me every night. All of it had been shattered in the span of a few hours by the most careless kind of betrayal imaginable. After what felt like an eternity, I heard Susan moving through the house. I assumed she was packing like I'd told her to do. But when she appeared in the living room doorway, I realized she wasn't ready to give up without a fight. She had her phone clutched in her hand, her face streaked with tears but set with determination. Gary, she said, her voice trembling. Please, just give me 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. I looked at her, feeling the anger bubble back to the surface. Talk about what, Susan? About how you lied to me? About how you brought him into my garage? What's left to say? She hesitated, her grip tightening on her phone. You don't understand. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Jake, he's been pressuring me for months. It wasn't entirely my fault. I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. Not your fault? Are you seriously trying to play the victim here? You had every chance to say no, to come to me if something was wrong. Instead, you went behind my back. Her lip quivered, but her eyes hardened. You don't know what it's like, Gary. You're never here anymore. You're married to that job and I'm alone here day after day. I didn't plan for this to happen. Don't you dare turn this around on me, I snapped, standing up. I've been busting my back for us, for our future. And you've been sneaking around like some teenager. This isn't on me, Susan. This is all on you. She started to respond, but her phone buzzed in her hand. She glanced at the screen, and her face went even paler. She quickly tried to hide the phone behind her back. What was that? I demanded. Nothing, she said quickly. It's not important. Don't lie to me anymore. Give me the phone. She shook her head, backing toward the hallway. No, it's private. Private? My voice rose. You lost the right to privacy when you started sneaking around with Jake. Hand it over. She made a move toward the hallway, but I was faster. I caught her arm. Not hard enough to hurt her, but firm enough to stop her. Give me the phone, Susan. With tears streaming down her face, she reluctantly handed it over. My hands shook as I unlocked it. Of course I knew her passcode. We'd been married for 8 years. What I found made my stomach turn. There were dozens of messages from Jake, each one more explicit than the last. They talked about meeting up, about sneaking around behind my back. Some of the messages even joked about how clueless I was, how easy it was to fool me. But that wasn't the worst part. There were messages to someone else, a name I didn't recognize at first. Amanda. Curious and dreading what I might find, I opened that conversation thread. What I saw made my heart stop. Amanda wasn't just some friend. She was Susan's coworker, and the messages revealed a conspiracy that went much deeper than I'd imagined. Amanda had been covering for Susan at work, lying to their boss about fake business trips and meetings. The two women had been plotting together, creating elaborate stories to explain Susan's absences. I felt sick to my stomach. Susan, I said, my voice low and dangerous. You've been lying to everyone, haven't you? Not just to me, but to your boss, to everyone we know. What else haven't you told me? She didn't answer, just stood there trembling. I scrolled further through the messages, my fury growing with each revelation. Then I found something that made my blood run cold. It was a picture taken inside our garage. Jake and Susan were standing together, laughing, and in the background was something I hadn't noticed before. My toolbox was wide open. "What is this?" I demanded, shoving the phone in her face. She glanced at the picture, her eyes widening in panic. "Gary, I can explain." "Explain what? Why is my toolbox open? What the hell were you doing in there?" She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. That's when I noticed something else in the background of the photo. My safe. The small, fireproof safe I kept hidden under the workbench, where I stored our emergency cash and important documents. Without another word, I stormed toward the garage, Susan following behind me, begging me to stop. When I reached the safe, my worst fears were confirmed. It was empty. I turned to Susan, my vision blurred with rage. "Where is it?" She backed away, her hands up defensively. "Gary, please. I didn't mean—" Jake needed it, and I thought— "You thought what?" I roared. "You thought it was okay to steal from me? From us?" Her silence was answer enough. This wasn't just infidelity anymore. This was theft. Betrayal on every level I could imagine. "How much?" I asked, my voice cold and steady. She shook her head, tears streaming. "I didn't take all of it. Just some." "How much is gone, Susan?" Her voice was barely a whisper. $5,000. $5,000. Money I'd been saving for years, working double shifts and overtime whenever I could get it. Money that was supposed to be for emergencies, for our future, for the down payment on a better house we'd talked about. "Legal issues," she whispered. "Jake said he needed it for legal issues. He promised to pay it back." I laughed bitterly. "So now you're funding his life too. What's next, Susan? Were you planning to sign the house over to him?" "It wasn't like that," she sobbed. I thought you wouldn't miss it right away. I was going to replace it before you noticed." "You thought wrong." I could barely contain my rage. "You threw away everything we built for him." She slid down the garage wall until she was sitting on the concrete floor, her face buried in her hands. I wanted to feel something, anger, sorrow, anything. But all I felt was an empty, aching void. Then it hit me. If she'd gone this far, what else had she done? How could I trust that this was the end of it? "Give me your phone again," I demanded. She looked up, startled. "Gary, please. Now." Reluctantly, she slid the phone across the floor. I picked it up and went through her messages again, this time looking deeper. What I found made my blood run cold. There were more transactions. More withdrawals from our joint account that I hadn't noticed. Small amounts at first, then larger ones. Thousands of dollars funneled into accounts I didn't recognize. "You've been stealing from me this whole time," I said, my voice trembling with rage. "How long has this been going on?" "Just a few months," she whispered. "I didn't mean for it to get this far." "A few months of theft. A few months of lies." I shook my head. "You didn't mean for it to get this far?" "Susan, every single thing you did was deliberate. Every lie, every theft, every time you brought him into my house, it was all a choice." She reached toward me desperately. "Gary, I made a mistake. Please, we can fix this. I'll get the money back. I'll cut all ties with Jake. Just give me one more chance." I stepped back. "A chance? You've had plenty of chances, Susan, and you chose to betray me every single time." Her sobs grew louder, but I was beyond caring. My mind was already racing ahead, thinking about what I needed to do next. This wasn't just betrayal. It was systematic theft and deception on a scale I never thought possible. As I walked back toward the house, leaving her crumpled on the garage floor, my phone buzzed with another message from Walter. "Gary, I didn't want to alarm you earlier, but there's something else. Jake's been coming to your house during the day when you're at work. You might want to check your security system." A chill ran down my spine. I rushed to my home office and pulled up the security camera app on my computer. As I scrolled through the footage, my heart sank even further. There he was. Jake, coming and going from my house like he owned the place. Sometimes he'd park down the street and sneak in through the back door. Other times he'd walk boldly through the front entrance with Susan greeting him like a welcomed guest. My hands clenched into fists as I watched them together in my living room, my kitchen, my bedroom. This wasn't just an affair. It was a complete invasion of my home, my sanctuary, my life. I knew one thing for certain: this was far from over. The security footage played out like scenes from my worst nightmare. Jake strolling through my house, sitting on my couch, drinking coffee from my mugs. In one clip, he was actually wearing one of my shirts, my favorite flannel shirt that Susan claimed had been lost in the laundry. I slammed the laptop shut, unable to watch anymore. Susan was still in the garage, her muffled cries barely audible through the walls. I couldn't face her right now. The betrayal had seeped into every corner of my life, poisoning even the most ordinary things. My phone rang. It was Walter. "Gary?" His voice was cautious. "I wasn't sure if I should call, but I figured you'd want to know everything." "How much did you see, Walter? Don't hold anything back." There was a long pause. "I've been watching Jake come around for months. At first I thought maybe he was a relative or someone doing work on the house, but then I started noticing the pattern. He only came when you weren't home. And the way he and Susan acted together. It wasn't right. Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Honestly, I wasn't sure what to do. It's not easy to tell a man his wife might be cheating. But when I saw what happened in the garage tonight, I couldn't keep quiet anymore." I thanked Walter and hung up, then sat staring at the wall, trying to piece together my next move. My anger was simmering just below the surface, but I knew confronting Jake directly wouldn't solve anything. I needed to be smart about this. I called our bank's customer service line. After working through a maze of security questions, I finally reached an agent. "I need to report unauthorized withdrawals from my account," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The agent pulled up our records and began reading off amounts and dates. With each number, my stomach churned. Susan hadn't just taken the $5,000 from the safe. Over the past several months, she had drained nearly $15,000 from our savings accounts. "Is there any way to reverse these transactions?" I asked. "I'm sorry, sir. Unless you can prove fraud, we can't reverse the charges. Since your wife is an authorized user on the accounts, these withdrawals appear legitimate from our perspective." Fraud. That word stuck with me after I hung up. Legally, it would be difficult to prove that Susan's actions constituted fraud since we were married, and she had legal access to the accounts. But morally, there was no question what she had done. I walked back to the garage. Susan was still there, sitting on the cold concrete, looking utterly defeated. "Susan," I said quietly, "look at me." She raised her head, her face streaked with tears. "You're going to write down every cent you took," I said. "Every withdrawal, every lie, every detail. You're going to confess to all of it." "Why?" she whispered. "Because I need it in writing. If there's any chance of salvaging anything from this disaster, you'll do exactly what I say. Otherwise, I'm calling a lawyer first thing in the morning." Her hands shook as she took the pen and paper I offered. I watched her closely as she scribbled out her confession, my anger simmering with every word she wrote. When she finished, she handed me the paper, her eyes pleading. "I'm sorry, Gary. I don't know what else to say." I folded the paper and put it in my pocket. "This doesn't fix anything, Susan. It's just a start." "What happens now?" she asked. I didn't answer because I honestly didn't know. But one thing was clear. This marriage was over, and I needed to protect whatever was left of my life and my finances. Over the next few hours, I made several phone calls. First, I transferred all remaining funds from our joint accounts into a new account under my name only. Then I called a locksmith and scheduled them to come first thing in the morning to change all the locks on the house. Finally, I contacted a divorce attorney I'd found online and set up an appointment for later in the week. Susan spent the night in the garage. I didn't invite her back into the house, and she didn't ask. By morning, she had packed a bag and left without saying goodbye. I found a note on the kitchen table saying she was staying with her sister and that she hoped we could work things out. But I was done working things out. The trust was broken beyond repair, and I'd learned the hard way that some betrayals can't be forgiven or forgotten. 3 days later, I met with the divorce attorney, bringing Susan's written confession and printed copies of all the text messages and bank records I'd discovered. The lawyer reviewed everything carefully. "You have a strong case for adultery and financial misconduct," she told me. "With this evidence, we can probably recover at least some of the money she took, and we can certainly ensure you're protected in the divorce proceedings." Within a week, Susan received the divorce papers. She called me, crying and begging for another chance, but I'd already moved beyond that point. The woman I'd married was gone. Maybe she'd never really existed in the first place. The person who had stolen from me, lied to me, and brought another man into my home wasn't someone I could ever trust again. The divorce took 4 months to finalize. Susan fought it initially, claiming she wanted to go to counseling and work on our marriage. But when faced with the evidence I'd gathered, she eventually agreed to a settlement. I kept the house and most of our assets, while she was required to pay back as much of the stolen money as possible. Jake disappeared from the picture entirely once the legal proceedings began. Apparently, his interest in Susan waned considerably when there were no more secrets to keep and no more money to be taken. She tried to contact me several times after he left, but I never responded. Looking back now, I realized there were signs I should have noticed. Susan had become distant over the past year, spending more time on her phone and finding excuses to be away from the house. She'd started working late more often and had developed new interests that didn't include me. But I'd been so focused on my job and our financial goals that I'd missed the warning signs entirely. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was realizing that I'd been living with a stranger. The woman who could systematically steal from me, lie to my face for months, and violate our home with another man wasn't the person I'd fallen in love with 8 years earlier. Maybe she'd changed, or maybe I'd never really known her at all. 6 months after the divorce was final, I ran into Walter at the grocery store. He asked how I was doing, and I told him honestly, better than I expected. The house felt more like home without the constant undercurrent of deception. My finances were stabilizing. I was sleeping better. "You did the right thing," Walter said. "I know it wasn't easy, but some lines can't be uncrossed." He was right. There are some betrayals that cut too deep to heal, some trust that can't be rebuilt. Susan had crossed every line imaginable, and there was no path back from that. Today, nearly a year later, I'm genuinely happier than I was during those final months of our marriage. The loneliness was difficult at first, but it was honest loneliness, not the hollow feeling of being betrayed by someone who was supposed to love and protect you. I've started dating again, cautiously. I've learned to pay attention to red flags I might have ignored before. Most importantly, I've learned that trust, once broken completely, is impossible to repair. Some mistakes are simply too big to overcome. Susan tried to contact me on what would have been our 9th wedding anniversary. She sent a long text message apologizing again and asking if we could meet for coffee to talk. I deleted the message without responding. There was nothing left to say. The garage is still my sanctuary, but now it feels truly private again. I finished restoring that old motorcycle. It runs beautifully now. Sometimes I take it out on the back roads just to clear my head and remember what it feels like to be in control of where I'm going. I don't hate Susan anymore. The anger has faded into something more like pity. She traded 8 years of marriage and a stable life for a few months with a man who abandoned her the moment things got complicated. She gave up someone who loved her for someone who was simply using her. But that's her burden to carry now, not mine. I've moved on, older and wiser, with a much clearer understanding of what I will and won't accept in my life. The betrayal nearly destroyed me, but ultimately, it freed me from a relationship that was built on lies. Sometimes the worst thing that can happen to you turns out to be the best thing in the long run. It just takes time to see it clearly.